Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for allowing us to speak with your firm today. We will be analyzing the markets of Vietnam and Indonesia, and in doing so, we hope to provide a clear and strategic decision for your firm for your next foreign investment decision as Canadian Solar. We understand that your firm focuses on designing and manufacturing solar panels, modules, and wafers, and that you actively seek partnerships with companies in pursuit of carbon neutral goals. As such, we have formulated our analysis around key economic, social, and sector indicators in both markets before providing our recommendation to you.
Thank you, Amma. Both Indonesia and Vietnam are located at Southeastern Asia. The size of Indonesia is about 6 times larger than Vietnam, and the population is 3 times bigger than Vietnam. The value of the currencies are both very weak against the Canadian dollar. Both countries are a member of ACD, ASEAN, IMF, and the UN. Indonesia is also a member of G20 and OPEC, and Vietnam is a member of MGC. Indonesia economic faced a recession in 2020. Due to lockdown and shutdown of the business, the real GDP contracted by 1.8 in 2020. Vietnam was one of the few economies in the world that registered positive economic growth amid COVID-19. The country's GDP grew by 2.9 in 2020, making it one of the fastest-growing economies in Asia. Indonesia has 4 times larger GDP than Vietnam, but on a GDP per capita basis, Indonesia doesn't have significant advantage. The 5 years average GDP growth rate of Vietnam is 6%, which is much higher than Indonesia. Country risk refer to uncertainty fact related to the invest in a specific country, such as political, economics, exchange rate, or technical influence. The two countries are at the same level of the risk. Vietnam has very low FDI restrictions compared to Indonesia. Also, Vietnam has a very friendly investment framework. This fact helps Vietnam attract more FDI. Now, let's look at fiscal and monetary policy. Indonesia's current account deficit in 2019 was one of the largest deficits. It was due to the government fiscal spending to keep the Indonesia economic from shrinking in the pandemic. The current account deficit decline in 2020 was due to a lower oil-gas trade deficit as government implemented tight import measures. In 2020, Vietnam's current account surplus dropped due to decline amount of travel and remittance. Vietnam observed strong export growth due to a high in demand for IT components from advanced countries. Vietnam increased the foreign reserve also have helped to increase the surplus. The Bank in Indonesia cut the interest rate 6 times in 2020 in order to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. The interest rate stood at 3.5 in 2021. The State Bank of Vietnam cut its interest rate 3 times in 2020. By cutting rates, both countries want to boost consumptions and hope that the lower rate will lead to huge investment. Indonesia's unemployment rate raised to 7.1 in 2020. It's mainly due to the COVID-19 pandemic has reduced employment opportunities across the country. Also, Indonesia has very strict labor regulations and high severance pay, which has hurt the recruitment. The unemployment rate in Vietnam is 3.3 in 2020. It remains very low. It's mainly because it's continued to grow in nominal wages and the workforce continued to move from agriculture sector towards the manufacture sectors. Indonesia's inflation rate recorded at 2 in 2020. It was below the central bank's target. The inflation rate has increased since people return to work, which boosts the purchase power. Vietnam's inflation rate rose to 3.22 in 2020. It's in line with government target range. The reason of increase is mainly due to the increase in price of rice and the global supply chain disruptions. The increase in oil price along with upstick in global demand may inflate price in 2021. Next, Jensen will talk about culture difference and the social factor.
Vietnam and Indonesia are culturally similar in terms of Hofstede dimensions. They're both collectivistic and hierarchical societies compared to Canada, and the people are more restrained and long-term oriented. One noticeable difference is in the uncertainty avoidance, representing that Vietnamese tend to be more pragmatic and adaptable compared to Indonesians and Canadians. However, the social norm in Vietnam in general does not emphasize rules, which is something to consider in making an FDI decision. To sum up the economic and social environment, the current general economic environment is more favorable towards Indonesia, but Vietnam has higher growth potential. Vietnam also has more FDI-friendly environment with policies that are favorable towards solar energy industry, which we will discuss more in detail.
With growing industrialization and economic modernization, the energy demand in Vietnam is predicted to increase by over 8% by 2030 and is expected to triple by 2050. The energy generation in Indonesia is expected to increase by around 350% by 2050. Both the countries are not expected to be self-sufficient in the long term. Indonesia, being one of the largest exporters of coal, is expected to rely heavily on coal and natural gas reserves. However, Vietnam has already started investing in alternative sources of energies as its self-sufficiency is expected to significantly drop. By 2050, Vietnam is expected to rely the most on its natural gas reserves, followed by imported coal. Solar is expected to become the third biggest contributor to Vietnam's energy production. Today, there are over 150 solar farms in Vietnam with an installed capacity of 8.5 gigawatt and over 9 gigawatt capacity of rooftop solar systems. The rise in solar power production has been drastic. 45% of this growth has resulted from purely private investments, both foreign and domestic, while 35% of capacity growth involved foreign direct investment. The lack of consistent and promotive policy to develop renewable energy projects has contributed to slow uptake of solar energy. Solar's share in Indonesia's energy generation is expected to remain below 0.5%. Canadian Solar is already among the top solar PV modules manufacturers. Jinko Solar is currently the biggest supplier, followed by JA Solar, Longi, and Trina Solar. These 5 manufacturers hold more than 80% of the solar PV market. Intermittent source of energy will remain to be the limitation of solar in mass-scale adoption. However, battery storages are expected to pave the way for a renewable-powered future. Canadian Solar aims to be an integrated solution provider company and not just a PV module supplier, which would set it apart from the competition in the years to come. This picture shows one of the largest utility solar power plant which is located in India, depicting the huge potential in the Southeast Asian market for Canadian Solar.
Indonesia has a significant volume advantage in terms of coal reserves, with over 10 times the proven reserves than Vietnam. What we have found is that a significant share of Indonesia's labor force works in the coal industry, while the Vietnamese government has an incentive to reduce its reliance on coal. Indonesia can meet its own electricity demands through coal production, while Vietnam does not produce enough coal domestically to meet its own demand. Climate change policies are an important consideration when determining the right market for solar investment, both in terms of the steps each government has taken and also in the likelihood that climate change goals will be achieved. A global ranking by the World Bank Group identified Vietnam as a top 5 country likely to be most impacted by climate change. In fact, it's estimated that climate change will reduce national income by up to 3.5% by 2050. The potential risks for Vietnam stretch both socially and economically across multiple regions and sectors. To combat this, Vietnam has developed a nationally determined contribution, which states that they will reduce emissions on domestic resources by 9% by the year 2030. They have also developed a law on environmental protection, which, effective January 2022, will introduce an emissions trading framework for businesses to trade and also a carbon tax. On the other hand, Indonesia, as one of the world's largest greenhouse gas emitters, has not been able to achieve their climate change initiatives as easily. Climate change has, in large part, taken a backseat to poverty, where any emission reduction strategy is feared to be met with backlash if the underlying employment rate suffers. While the country has committed to diversifying their resources with an emphasis on sustainability, the country also created the Omnibus Law, whereby power was transferred from local to central governments for environmental protection. The global community has viewed this initiative as an emissions setback due to the reduced monitoring and licensing requirements. These policies, under the Indonesia Ministry of Energy, and mineral resources requires renewable energy projects to compete strictly on an economic basis and not under a social or global perspective.
The company has certain risk element it inherits due to being in nascent solar sector. There is risk of a price drop in solar modules due to oversupply situation, something that really happened in 2020 back then. While many studies have shown that the electric cost from solar PV is much cheaper, political situation can never be discounted. For example, US under Trump gave boost to coal industries and was not interested in providing subsidy or support to renewable sector. We'll explore ways to mitigate above risk when it comes to FDI decision in Indonesia and Vietnam. The company has so far delivered 5 global warming potential equivalent of photovoltaic solar modules to its clients across 20 countries and 6 continents, and has worked as an external module supplier and consultant to assist local companies in making solar farms and rooftop installations, as well as 6 projects within Vietnam itself, and has got good brand reputation due to that, and it will help in creating an FDI in Vietnam in coming days. The organization has currently 4 manufacturing centers in Canada, China, India, and Thailand, and is a publicly listed firm on Nasdaq as CSIQ. The organization's technical and innovation team has made commendable progress when it comes to improving the wattage capacity of each module over the last 1 decade, as well as made sure that the greenhouse gas emission payback time is around 1.1 years for fossil powered economies, especially when it comes to Vietnam and Indonesia. Coming to the financial strength of the organization, it is to be noted that CSI has improved its ability to pay debt as well as improved its cash assets by 76%. It is also to be noted that they have created a separate FDI subsidiary in China, and that experience can certainly be leveraged to create a new FDI entity within Vietnam.
Thank you, Anurag. We will now take you through our decision process and outline several key steps that your company must take for a successful launch. Our research points to Vietnam as having a strategic advantage over Indonesia for foreign direct investment in solar power. The country has considerable momentum towards solar energy, with rooftop solar PV capacity increasing by 2,400% since the beginning of 2019. Vietnam also has a considerably higher standing than Indonesia on the Renewable Energy Country Attractiveness Index. Entering the Vietnamese market at this time would also leverage the economic climate, as the government is actively trying to reduce its reliance on external supply chains. For example, countries like China, where 99% of their solar panel imports come from. We also see an opportunity to capitalize on Vietnam's feed-in tariff program. This is a government incentive program to encourage investment in renewable energy by rewarding producers with a fixed, above-market sell price to EVN, the state-owned monopoly buyer and distributor of electricity.
It is important to establish partnership with EVN, as EVN is the state-supported largest electricity provider and the largest purchaser that has potential to buy our electricity generated on solar farms and distribute it to the users. On the other hand, establishing partnership with Ministry of Industry and Trade will help understand and utilize policies that are meant to help get access to all resources such as labor, water, and facilitate industrial connections. Vietnam is also known to possess one of the highest potential reserves for rare earth minerals, some of which has not even been utilized. Partnership with mining firms to harness potential of the domestic reserves can help bring down the cost of battery and inverter packs. To determine the size of module manufacturing, we can consider the scale of Jinko Solar's decision to manufacture solar modules of 7 gigawatt equivalent at the investment of $500 million. Vietnam added 9.3 gigawatt capacity in 2020 and is slated to increase by 10% by the end of 2021. To cater to the demand, approximately 16 million solar modules needs to be manufactured, considering an average module capacity of 600 watt. There is also great potential to partner with local financial institutions to provide financing to beneficiaries who cannot afford to get minimum threshold capital. Moving to segment of choice, we have narrowed down to rooftop installation as our first priority, followed by setting up floating solar farm and finally ground solar farms. This can be attributed to the difference in feed tariff subsidy provided by EVN. Rooftop has been given highest subsidy since it allows distributor to save on infrastructure and grid maintenance. Based on domestic electric consumption data per capita, we believe one module with average 600 watt capacity is sufficient to satisfy consumption need of 2 family members.
Thank you, Canadian Solar, for allowing us to present our proposal to you today. We now open the floor up to any questions.